So our next guest doesn't need a lot of introductions. Maybe some folks that haven't been here before or seen have actually been in her shoes as a developer, because this guy is ubiquitous. I go out to my shed to get a tool out, and there he is, handing out literature, right? So you look on Facebook, and this guy is wearing out his shoes. We're going to need to start a GoFundMe page to buy the gentleman some shoes. Anyway, Jeromey Sims, I met him in the 2018 campaign. He was running for House District 91. And for some reasons, defying logic and reason, he didn't win. Okay?
Gerrymandered.
Absolutely. You were robbed, Jeremy. Anyway, this guy is a bit of a Renaissance man. Born in Texas, lived a little bit of time in Colorado. While he was in Colorado, he kind of knocked around a little bit, and by the way, he became valedictorian of his high school and all that kind of stuff, so no big chops. Wound his way back here to Texas. He's been in this area for about 20 years, been in the North Texas area for about that time, got in the IT business, and he had a bunch of buddies, decided they were going to take some risk, and they formed their own IT services company called Tuxedo Technologies. He's currently a vice president, has to be payroll, has to go do customer stuff. I know how hard that is because that's my business, but he also finds time to come out and talk to us about things in terms of how we communicate better. He also has time to block wall. And that helped not only his own campaign, but everybody else's as well. Yep. He's one of the most generous guys I've ever seen. One of the smartest guys I've ever seen. And he's going to be the next state representative for House District 91. Yep. So that's why he's going to
Hello, that's a great introduction, and now I'm thoroughly embarrassed and I'm going to go home. My name is Jeromey Sims, and I am running for Texas House District 91, and I said I would not use my 2 minutes talking about the campaign, because tonight I want to focus on Litkoff, but before I get to that, I do want to point out that I am running for office, and in the office that I'm running for, if I can get 500 people that live in my district to sign my petition, it saves me $750. So unless you'd like to write me $750 check, please come sign my petition if you live in my district. If you don't know if you live in my district, it's very easy. It's Richland Hills, North Richland Hills, Haltom City, Watauga, and a little bit of Fort Worth. But also, you have to have good visual aids, so I have a map. So, in case you forget, you can come check I'll put this on the table up here. You can look at the map. You can sign the petition. Is that it? Oh, okay. One more thing. Because it is a grassroots campaign, if you like what you hear tonight, please go leave a tip at votesims.com. I have Act Blue just like every other Democratic candidate who is running for office. So even if you don't live in my district, it's okay. And in Texas, there are no limits on campaign donations. So, you know, if you do have $1 million, please feel free to donate, because I'm not taking corporate PAC money. So there you go. All right. One more bit of housekeeping. The slides, this is the second time I've done this. By the way, if you go do a presentation and a guy shows up and says, I'm a professor of the thing you're about to give a presentation for, you should, like, thanks, John. This is the second time that he's hearing this. So,
I'm following you around, man.
if you ask hard questions, I'm just going to send you to John and he can answer the questions. No, I have handouts that have a lot of the information that's in the slides. I don't want to hand them out now because I want to engage you in the conversation. They're on the table for you to pick up on the way out. Yay! Okay. All right, with that, let's get going. If you have not heard of George Lakoff, let me see you raise your hand, please. Yeah? Okay, wow, awesome. All right. Oh, and to those of you who went to Indivisible Grapevine and heard this, I apologize, you're going to hear it again, but you showed up and it's on you. So, okay, George Lakoff he is such a smart guy. He's a retired distinguished professor of cognitive science and linguistics at the University of California, Berkeley, and currently director of Center for Neural Mind. And most importantly to me, he wrote lots of books about policy, framing, talking about your values, how those things interact in your mind, and how it interacts in the mind of the person that you're talking to. So when after Trump got elected, I started trying to understand what the heck happened, just like all of the rest of you. And so I started going to things and talking to people, and it seemed like we were just talking a different language, and we couldn't break through the fog of what the other person was saying. So anyway, somebody pointed out to me, have you read Don't Think of an Elephant? And so I said, no, I haven't, and I will go get it. And I did. So I went to my library and said, can you buy books? And they said yes. So I filled out the form, and the next week they called me and said, your book is here. So props to the library in North Richland Hills. They will get your book. Anyway, so I've read all these 3 books. I recommend them all. There are more on the paper. Pretty much anything that George Lakoff has written is really easy to understand and very valuable. So a lot of the material that you will see tonight comes almost directly from the book. Ding. Okay. So what we're talking about tonight is framing. And if you have not heard of framing, the basic premise is that your politics is based on what we're going to call your moral code. Each of us has a dominant moral code that we either were born with or came to acquire. I don't know, you can ask John where that came from. And it determines how we view most situations in life. So whether you realize it or not, these core values guide how you interact with the rest of the world, including your family members, strangers, churches, everybody that you interact with. And you may use a different moral code or frame depending on what situation that you're in. And so it's going to be maybe interesting for you to think back on how you interact differently depending on the situation that you're in and why you feel that way. Okay, this is the strict father moral code. There's 2 moral codes that we're going to talk about. Strict father moral code, as you can imagine. This embraces the idea that there is a natural order to things in the universe or the world or America or whatever situation you find yourself. I tend to think of Lord of the Flies when I see natural order, but you know, whatever. The theory of the strict father moral code is that the authority is justified by the morality that that person holds. And then to me, it's also vice versa, because then your morality justifies that you should hold the authority. So this is a very circular logic that goes on in this brain, in my opinion. This theory says that children want to do what feels good. Well, we all kind of do, but it dumbs them down to say that they only want to do what feels good, and that we as parents must discipline them and train the child to do what we consider right. Because remember, we're the strict father moral authority. We get to decide. This theory embraces having or showing respect for authority and quietly following the rules that is required. And generally, you're not allowed to question the rules or ask questions or try to learn why things happen, because that's just the way it is, because I'm the dad and I tell you so. I heard that growing up. Okay. Personal responsibility, super high on this list. This is something that you'll hear Republicans talking about when they're trying to push a policy or, work against the other one, is that people ought to have personal accountability or responsibility, and so we shouldn't have to deal with this problem if they would just pick up themselves by their own bootstraps with the boots that they don't own yet because they don't have enough money to buy boots. So, they also think that handouts are, quote, free stuff, and that you shouldn't give your kids free stuff because it robs them of agency and the opportunity to grow or be successful in life. These issues are generally binary. There is not a lot of wiggle room in the strict father moral code. It's either right or wrong, and I don't know if you guys experienced that. I grew up as a preacher's kid, and I grew up in kind of this environment. It was very weird, but I grew up in this environment in some circumstances, and for instance, if you want to ask, well, how do we know that the Bible is the inspired word of Jesus passed down from several languages all the way to English with no mistakes? Well, that's not a question that I get to ask because I'm the preacher's kid, right? So anyway, we'll talk about Bible later on, after the show. Okay. The second type of moral code, which is probably what most of you can identify with in here, is the nurturant parent moral code. Sometimes they call this the nurturant mother moral code, because generally mothers are more nurturing, but being Democrats, we kind of should be gender neutral, right? So it's the nurturant parent moral code. This is basically the idea that you should use empathy and nurturing to teach your kids. You should teach them responsibility in that context for both yourself, your kids, and then we expand the circle out to the neighbors, and then we expand it out to the people in your city, and then it just keeps going out in concentric circles because you as a nurturant parent care about the world and the universe and whatever else you think is out there. Believes that children start out good and they need learning and encouragement and exploration and all kinds of cool, fun things for kids to do. And that, yes, you're going to make mistakes, but we know that because they're kids and they're not adults, and so we should expect that and roll with it. Giving children what they need increases their chance of success. Now, that doesn't mean that you give them everything and become their servant, obviously, that's crazy, but you give them the tools that they need. You teach them, you introduce them to things that are different from what they had seen before so that they can have a broader understanding of the world and how they fit into it. It emphasizes understanding and appreciation of the differences between people. Okay. So let me just stop here. Is anybody not clear on the two moral codes? Because we're going to talk about this. Strict father, nurturant parent. Okay, here we go. Now, the combo. Biconceptuals. It's okay, we can talk about being bi. We're Democrats, it's all right. Biconceptuals are people who are predisposed to one moral code or the other, which is everyone. But can be persuaded to the other moral code because of life experiences or maybe whatever situation you find yourself in or whoever happens to be talking to you. Guess what? You are all biconceptuals, you just don't know it yet. Because none of us is completely one or the other. You probably have some aspects of your life that you will find that you identify one way or the other. You're able to hold both worldviews in your mind at the same time without having cognitive dissonance and like your brain freezing out. You can see both sides of the moral code, and maybe you can see good in both sides, and you have to pick. So here's an example of being biconceptual. This is the first one that comes to my mind. Growing up in church, money is the root of all evil, right? You hear that all the time. But then, also, many people that I grew up with believe that capitalism is supreme, and that we should almost worship capitalism too, right? So those two things kind of don't really go together. So, not that I hold those things, but a biconceptual could hold those beliefs. Also, a union worker who really strongly believes and supports the union on his or her job, but then comes home and raises his kids, or her kids, as a strict parent. So, you hold both things. And there are in-group exceptions also. We talked about this a little bit earlier, especially nurturant, where say, for instance, in your church group, you might treat those people differently or view them differently or use a different moral code in those interactions. This kind of goes with tribalism. You treat your tribe differently, and you give them exceptions to the rule and don't hold them to the same accountability or rules that you would other people. Right? Okay, good. So, framing. Framing is about metaphors. So all that other stuff was to get you ready to learn about framing. Our brains are tied to our hearts, metaphorically speaking. See what I did there? And so the way that you process information and make decisions or interact with the world is not just logic-based. Many times it comes from your heart. And really, when we talk about politics, touching someone's heart and reaching their heart is really where you get people motivated and win them over to your side. Framing is a way to do that because you speak in metaphors, and metaphors talk to your brain and your heart. Metaphors allow you to create your own advantage, and we'll see that. You present your ideas with very specific words and phrases, but they're not magic words and they're not magic phrases. They're tools that you can use to craft your own magic words and phrases that fit your personality. When you use them correctly, this can have the ability to exploit a vulnerability in your subconscious mind. And I love this because I work in IT and I always think of it as a hack. So you can hack the other person's brain and then you can take over and, do whatever you want. Okay, you can, you as the framer, if you get to set the frame, you get to set up the debate in a way that opens the other person's mind to your point of view and to see your moral code. Does that sound like fun? Anybody would like to do that? Yes? Okay. Okay, so I already said it's like a hack for your brain. Okay. Frank Luntz. Have you guys seen this guy on the news?
Yeah.
Every time there's an election, look who's on TV. It's Frank Luntz again. Okay, so Frank Luntz is a Republican strategist, and he is like the counter. He's like the super villain for George Lakoff, right? He's the Republican version who comes up with these ideas and ways to frame them that makes Democrats look bad or not able to come up with a response to whatever the Republicans are going to come up with. Some of the things that he has done is he changed drilling for oil to exploring for energy, because that sounds cool. He had the idea, or was one of the guys who had the idea, that we should stop talking about global warming because that sounds really scary and people are freaked out by it. We should just call it climate change, because the climate is just like what's around you, and yeah, the weather changes, so big deal, right? Two totally different things, but the same topic. Tax reform, tax relief, that's kind of ambiguous. We'll talk about that. Gun safety versus gun control. You talk about gun safety, and then they always want to say that Democrats are for gun control. And one sounds safe, and the other one sounds like you're going to come round up guns. It's an automatic lose when you get in that situation. He was one of the people who came up with the idea that we should stop talking about estate tax and call it a death tax, because you shouldn't tax people when they die, because that's just wrong. But really what it is like it's taxing wealthy people on money that they're not going to use anymore because they're dead. So, undocumented immigrants versus illegal aliens. All of these are examples of talking about the same exact thing, but you're looking at it through two different total frames. Like, you can even picture the two different glasses that you would look through. They're totally different colors. Conservative media, think tanks, and experts have worked for decades on this issue. They have an entire organization that is built up around this idea of framing and putting that message out, messaging and trying to saturate America with their ideas and their framing. It's time for us to use our brains, embrace our values, and take back this debate. And that's why I love this work, because this is like chipping away at the giant iceberg that sunk the Titanic. But look, we got to get out there with our ice picks, y'all. We got to get this going. So, anyway, okay.
Detriment to us liberals and progressives is we capitulate to these new labels much too easily. Right. Anti-abortion is anti-choice, and yet we keep falling back. The one that kills me the most is the right to work law.
Yeah.
Right. Right to work for a lot less than what you're worth.
Right.
We cave into it.
Yeah, right to work is crazy. That is an excellent point. So right to work is a framing that Republicans use to make it so that workers don't have as many protections as they do, and don't get paid as much, and don't have as many benefits. So here we are in Texas, right to work state. Okay, the conservative moral hierarchy. This is a little bit more background. This is how George Lakoff, these are not my ideas, this is how George Lakoff says that people who use the strict father moral code view the world. So they put God above man, man above nature, the disciplined or strong above the undisciplined and the weak, rich above the poor, employers above employees, adults over children, of course, because strict father, men above women, whites above non-whites, Christians above non-Christians. I have something to say about that in Texas. Straights above gays. Western culture above other cultures. And America above other countries. Because America! Right, okay. Those are very controversial, and I understand that, but take your paper and go back and think about that and see if you don't see that in the media. Okay. Here is what we're going to talk about: good framing keys. When you go to set up your metaphor or have a conversation with someone, you want to use positive frames for yourself. And if you think back on a couple slides before with the examples, there were negative words like anti or other negative words that go along with those that if you put those on your framing that you want to use, you're going to automatically lose. So you want to put the negative framing on the other side of the argument. You should tell the truth, because I think you should tell the truth. Repetition, repetition, repetition. I put this in here because I love to watch Sunday morning political shows because I'm crazy, I guess. And if you notice, the Republicans are very, very good at this. They have their sheets that they send out, obviously, to all of them, and they all go on the Sunday morning talk shows, and they say the exact same phrases, no matter what question they're asked. If you flip through the channels, they're all saying the same damn thing. They have their story in a row, and they're repeating it, and they're not doing it because they don't have brains and can't think. They're doing it because it's effective. They know that through marketing, the more times you hear it, the more true it's going to be. And if you think back on Trump, he does the exact same thing. That's what his Twitter is all for. Every time he gives an interview, that is his purpose, is to repeat his message, and he gets it out to America all the time. Whether it's true or not is irrelevant. I'm telling you, the truth is irrelevant in his situation. It's all marketing. So, it's all framing. You should be prepared with analogies and metaphors that can break through the cloud of the mainstream media. So this means that when you go home tonight, or as you're watching the news, you need to sit back and maybe take notes or mental notes and think about the situation that you see that you don't like and you want to fight back on, and come up with an analogy or metaphor and be prepared with an answer for this. And we can talk about some of my answers later. Think about your audience. You have to craft your answer or your framing to the person that you're talking to, especially if you know them. So as a candidate, when you're knocking on the door, you don't know the person on the other side of the door, but if one of the first questions I lead with is, what do you care about as far as the Texas legislature goes? And their answer tells me what I need to talk to them about, because they're telling me what they care about. So you can use probing questions and things like that, cues, to try to pick up on how you should frame. Keep calm and frame on. If you can't keep it together and be respectful, you should just disengage. A lot of times I talk to people about this idea and say, this is kind of how you might be able to talk to your crazy drunk Uncle Bob at Thanksgiving dinner who's a MAGA hat person, right? But it's only that way if you're calm enough and reasonable enough and willing to let him spew whatever it is he's going to spew and then respond calmly. So if you can't, just don't even do it. It's not worth it for him or for you. It'll only make you angry and go drink more. Use your values, your stories, and your experiences to create a narrative. Remember, most of us can get along enough one-on-one to have a conversation, but when we pull back to a larger group like what I call the other, that's when the logic goes out the window and the rhetoric wins. So as soon as you get into these talking points and generalizing groups, just like we're generalizing groups here, as soon as you do that, I'm not talking to Gwen anymore, right? I'm talking to Democrats or Republicans, and that is not a way to do this. It's got to be one-on-one.
Related to this slide,
Yep.
I grew up in deep rural East Texas. I've got a lot of you know who follow me on Facebook know that I have a lot of very conservative high school friends and family members. And I would encourage everybody here, if you stick to these rules, to be truthful, don't post lies or memes that are lies. Don't unfriend your conservative friends, your right-wing ugly friends, unless they get really ugly and attack your friends and all that. But if at all possible, try to share our viewpoint with them with the assumption that maybe we'll break through one day. Yeah, I wish I could tell you all the success stories I've had. There's not very many, but it doesn't do any good for us all to be in our separate bubbles.
Yeah. That's a great idea, but I would amend that to say that I do not recommend trying to do this on social media. Like, it's just going to turn into a massive troll flame fest. So, again, one-on-one. Yes?
Question.
Yes, sir.
What happens in a conversation of that nature when it's determined that respect is not being offered from both sides?
Well, I usually say I really enjoy having this conversation with you because I think that I could learn something from you and hopefully you can learn something from me, but I'm only going to be able to do that if we can have respect for each other. So if you want to continue, then that's how we have to agree to go forward. And if not, then let's talk about something else. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah. I just think, in my opinion, if you talk to somebody
Yep.
and they feel you don't respect them, they're not listening.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you have to definitely show them respect. And you can't just be listening with that like far away stare and not paying attention, because if you're not able to reference back to something that they said, number one, you're not going to have an effective frame ready to go to counter their point. And number two, they're going to realize right away that what you're doing. So
Wait for the questions to begin, let Jeremy kind of get through. We're going to have a question.
I know it's a lot of materials. There is room for question at the end. Okay.
Yeah, relate to that, your middle one, think about your audience. I think relate to that is think about and actually listen.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Okay.
Real quick, she's talking about she's married to one of them, and that her framing's a little off. I said, "You're a saint." She goes, "Yeah, I'm insane." I said, "No, you're a saint." So speaking of framing, they already think we're all insane.
No, but
Go with saint.
You know,
But the way they frame it is,
You're insane.
you're a saint. Big old union guy, right? But nobody else is doing it.
you know, those two things are not mutually exclusive. You could be an insane saint. So, okay. All right. These things on this slide are not going to help you. So you need to remember them so that you do not do them, because you will automatically lose. Don't repeat the other side's framing or messaging, even with a not. The best example of this is the phrase, "I am not a crook." Right? I mean, I wasn't around to see that, but I know that. I've seen it. I am not a crook. Well, obviously, you are a crook. Because you just said, "I am a crook." You just slipped a not in there. So, to the subconscious mind, it just told everyone on national TV, "Oh, I'm a crook." Yeah. That's me. I'm guilty. I'm a crook. So, it does not work to put the not. Don't use whataboutism. You also just lost. You can't say, "My argument is right because what about blah, blah, blah that so-and-so did, or what policy that you do." That doesn't work. It's not going to work. It is like a rabbit hole, an endless conversation, because whataboutism goes nowhere. It is infinite. You'll never get anywhere. Don't rely just on facts, figures, and science. This is a liberal trap. If I could scream it, I would. It would hurt your ears. Because we as Democrats believe in science and things like climate change and equal rights for everybody. Facts,
Global warming.
global warming. Yeah, thank you. Good. Love that. Good job. So, anyway, we always think, as a group, general, if we come to the argument, we have all the science laid out, I printed out 2 reams of paper and carried it in my backpack so that I can whip it out and show you, look, right here, it says right here, this is the truth. We think we're going to win, but no. Because our brain is connected to our heart. And the heart does not believe the paper that your person is holding in front of you. Okay, do not just emotionally or instinctively react. You have to stop, take a deep breath, think deeply, and then respond. Respond is totally different from reacting. Because when you react, you're just going to repeat what you heard on the news on Rachel Maddow or whatever else that you've heard that's going to back up your argument. You're not going to be thinking about the issue and ready to tie it in with your personal story. This is key. Don't just repeat the talking points from Rachel Maddow. Point out when the other side does this, because it is a flaw in that circular thinking. When you take away their talking points and don't let them repeat what they heard on their media, they have to start thinking. And guess what? When both of you are thinking, number one, you're able to reach an agreement sometimes. And number two, you're at an automatic advantage because you did your homework and you have your thought processes ready to go. You have to talk about your story and your experience. This one is one of mine that I try to live by. I try to never compare myself to something that I don't want to be. For example, well, at least I'm not Donald Trump, right? Okay, like, could you set the bar any lower, or is there even a bar? Like, there is no bar. Just go to the bar. Anyway, okay. Choose carefully when you are dealing with what I call primal words. And I don't think this is in his book, but this is something that I've observed and picked up on, and I think it's a good idea. Maybe John can tell us why it does this. I don't know. But when your brain and your heart hear very primal words like blood, fire, rape, and murder, it evokes extreme reaction in your core or your soul or whatever you want to call it. And so you have to be super careful when you either use those words or hear those words and recognize that you're in a different place than when you started out. It's just it ratchets up the emotion and like a million times. So, yeah, okay, next. Yay, a fun picture. Okay, I know you can't read this, but I love this picture. It says frozen yogurt. Both of them are frozen yogurt. The one on the left says contains 10% fat. The one on the right says 90% fat-free. Which one do you pick? Yeah, but it's marketing, right? This is a perfect framing, right? Everybody wants to buy the 90% fat-free, even though they're exactly the same thing. So here are some example frames. It's counterterrorism versus the war on terror. Right? Because war on terror is like, we should take those guys out, right? They're attacking us. And this war on terror would even allow us to continue to go on. We don't just have a mission because terror is everywhere. We have to find it, root it out, kill it, right? Okay, universal health care versus socialized medicine. This one goes way back. Like, I can even remember when I was in school hearing about Hillary Clinton's healthcare plan and about how it was socialized medicine. It's the same argument today. Like, you're going to hear it, especially in these congressional races. You get asked a question about healthcare, you are going to be automatically labeled a Bernie socialist, right? Because you're going to support healthcare for everyone, no matter what label is on it, whether it's Medicare for all or whatever people come up with. That's going to be the frame. Privatization of education versus school choice. This is one of my pet ones because it's a Texas issue. A lot of people like to go for vouchers for private schools in certain circumstances. And they like to call it school choice because everybody likes choice, right? And everybody likes schools, so you should definitely have school choice. It's a freedom issue. It's your tax dollars and you should be able to decide what you want to do with it. But really, we all know that that just drains the money out of our public schools, and the good kids get out, and the kids who need the most help are left with the teachers who are not getting paid enough. So, it's the same issue, two sides of the frame. Paying your fair share versus tax relief. I made up paying your fair share, so if you don't like it, that's on me. But tax relief is one that Republicans have been using for years. Frank Luntz was part of that too. And we as Democrats, I don't believe, have come up with a good alternative frame for that. We struggle with that. So I choose to use paying your fair share. And I use it with corporations because they don't pay their fair share. Okay, I grew up in Boy Scouts and put my boys in Boy Scouts, and we enjoyed being in Boy Scouts. And one of the things that I came to realize is that whether you're a Democrat or Republican, if you're in Boy Scouts, you care about the environment. And you care about it deeply, so much so that you will go spend your weekend freezing or sweating your sweat off in Texas summer to go camping, right? With these boys to teach them about the outdoors and how important it is. Well, we don't talk about conservation and stewardship of the environment or the world or our surroundings. We let them talk about environmental regulations and about how that keeps our energy exploration from being successful and being able to have a good economy in Texas, right? So anyway, that's how I attack it. This one, okay. This is classic, and Mark mentioned it. It's anti-abortion versus pro-life, right? I'm sorry?
They're pro-birth.
You're right, it is pro-birth, yeah.
That's a choice.
But this is the example, and we all know that it's out there, right? This is what you run into every time you have this conversation with somebody, right? Why are you, anyway, go ahead, we all know it. Okay, can we all just agree? Americans support these following policies by overwhelming majorities, and I have the paper to prove it, right? In case you care, but I'm telling you, they have done polls of the majority of Americans, and they all support these ideas. I'm not saying they support these words, they support these policies and these ideas. Okay, healthcare for all, protecting and expanding Social Security, infrastructure, drug price negotiation competition, ending tax loopholes for corporations, and making corporations take responsibility for the 2008 financial crisis, and they support net neutrality. So, as Democrats, we need to assess this situation and realize that this is an opportunity that we have to hack our opponent's brain to say, well, do you care about holding people responsible when they do something that's wrong? Oh, yes you do, because you have that strict father moral code, and I know that about you. So if you care about holding people accountable and making sure that they follow the laws, then we need to pass rules to, number one, prevent corporations from being able to do that again, and number two, make them pay back that damn money that we're missing because they keep getting rich and we keep getting poor. Right? And it's not my fault. I mean, I have to work 2 jobs at sometimes just to pay my bills. I'm doing the hard work. It's not that I'm lazy. We need to have more balance in our economy. Okay, next. I could go on a rant about that. If I do, just take the mic away. Okay, these are my personal notes. So everything on this slide is my words. These are not George Lakoff. So throw them out if you want to. It's up to you. Texans support good public education and teachers, but they are suspect of administrators, and they think that those administrators are irresponsible or wasteful with the money. And this then can translate in some people to viewing the public schools as a whole as wasteful and unnecessary or inefficient or whatever you want to label it. I'm telling you this because I knocked on thousands and thousands and thousands of doors, just like Dennis said. I mean, my entire campaign was grassroots field. That was the extent of our strategy, was knock on all the damn doors and talk to all these people and try to get them to come vote. And I talked to Republicans, and they believe in public schools for the most part, and especially teachers. And if they know a teacher or have one in their family, which guess what, most of us do, because there are so many teachers in Texas, that is an issue that we can talk to people about, and if we can convince them that administrators are not wasting money, or if you can just throw that issue to the side and say really what it's all about is making sure that our kids have the best opportunity for success in life, and the best way to do that is to give them a good education. So whatever it costs me, I'm willing to pay in order for the kids to have a good education. Okay, Texans also want lower property taxes, surprise. But they do not understand that the Texas legislature is causing those property taxes to rise because the Texas legislature has been underfunding our public schools. And you all heard this because, I mean, we said it every time we got up to talk last time, right? This was one of the biggest things in the campaign. I cannot reach you as an individual on an emotional level unless I see you as a person and you see me as a person. So if you, like we talked about earlier, if you start hearing the talking points or just rhetoric, then that's a key that you need to just either change the conversation or get out. Okay, you should define who you are through your core values. So, I spent a lot of time thinking about this because the #1 speech that you have to give when you are a candidate is, why are you running for office? Right? And so I'm running for office because I saw that our Texas legislature was not treating the others the way I want to be treated, and it was not looking out for my neighbor, especially those who are in need. And as you can imagine, growing up in a Christian-style church as a preacher's kid, I heard those two things a lot, and it means something to me. And because it means something to me, That, I know, is part of my core value. I mean, I could get choked up here talking about it right now. That's how much it means to me. And so if I can tie back in an issue to one of those core values, I know that I can win because I know that I'm right when I'm talking about those things. And I know that they know that I'm right. I just have to convince them of it. Okay, please, let me say this again. Do not repeat conservative frames. If you hear these people on Sunday morning and they are Republican and you see it, do not repeat it. Don't go up to your friend and say, hey, I want to talk about environmental regulations. No, you don't. You want to talk about making sure that our kids have clean air and clean water when they grow up, right? And that their kids can have clean air and clean water. Because we all want those things. Okay. Ah, yes. Okay. Clear as mud? All right, good. See y'all later. That's okay. So this is freestyle framing. We didn't get to do this a lot in Grapevine because it took so long and I was long-winded. And I hope this has not been super boring. But I would love to talk with anybody about it. Yes, sir.
Very quickly, on the third bullet up there, it says we have to get personal with one